started. Um, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. This is the first time that we have done a YouTube Live, so thank you very much for finding us and enjoying this program. We'll be uploading this later in a few days after the event, but I really want to celebrate writing tonight. It's the 10th annual public reading by the Malden Writers Collaborative. And I feel very privileged to have known the Writers Collaborative these last 10 years. And I'm really looking forward to hearing the pieces that all the writers are sharing tonight. And with that, I want to turn it over to Chris Hickey, who is the facilitator for the writing group. And Chris, why don't you take it away?
Thank you so much, Jean. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight to view our reading. As it's been said in the announcements, we're a local writing group. We meet twice a month. In a great year, we do that in a live format. This year's been a little unorthodox because of the pandemic. So we shifted to online format, and we've finished out the year remotely. Was a bit of a challenge. Writing is a bit of a solitary pursuit. So one of the better parts of getting together in our local group is meeting with the folks that are like-minded, and we get together and we encourage each other, and we talk about the writing that we're doing. So the leadoff spot tonight, I'd like to introduce everybody to Jason M. Rubin. He's the author of 2 historical novels, The Grave and the Gay, based on a 17th century English folk ballad, and King of Kings, which tells of the meeting and romance between King Solomon and Queen Sheba, primarily from the Ethiopian tradition. Both are included in a single volume titled Ancient Tales Newly Told. Jason will read a fairy tale told from the perspective of the villain, which he originally wrote for one of our meetings this past season, and will be included in his next book, which will be a collection of fairy tales retold in this manner. Jason, please join us.
Thanks, Chris. As Chris said, this was a response to a prompt earlier this season. Prompt is writers speak for a short creative writing exercise. And after I wrote this fairy tale told from the perspective of the villain, I so enjoyed that exercise, that challenge of doing that I proceeded to write 12 more. And then talking with a friend of mine, also from the writers group, I decided to create another character who would actually travel the world and interview these villains and get their story. So I invented this character, Michel Archambault, who is wrongly imprisoned, and upon his release decides to go out and try to understand the motives of villains and what makes them tick. So he starts out with the first one, which is the one that I wrote for the group, based on Little Red Riding Hood, which I've titled Little Red Pool of Blood. Now, Michel, the character, does introductions and sort of summaries at the end of each of these stories. So I'm going to be reading in 2 characters, Michel and the wolf. So just to make it clear, I'll put my glasses up when I'm the wolf, and as Michel, I will have my glasses, and thus be able to read that much better. I went first to the outskirts of a forest, knowing I would likely find some action there. Little did I suspect that I would nearly be a witness to a violent and chaotic event. In fact, I arrived on the scene only moments after, with the villain near death. I was drawn to the location by the screams of 3 people who were running away. Perhaps the correct response would have been to join them, as clearly they were fleeing to safety. Yet the stories I sought were to be found in the mists of danger, not of sanctuary. And so I made my way to the place where their escape began, a house by the edge of the woods, the door wide open, with sounds of moaning inside. There I came upon a dreadful sight. It was a wolf, supine and bleeding on the floor. I had no relief to offer him and told him so. He merely grunted in response. I asked if he could tell me what had happened. This is what he told me. I lie here on the floor of a small house in a remote part of the village, near the forest that has been my home for 6 years. I am mortally wounded, gashed by an axe in my chest and my side, left here to die as the girl and the woodsman rescued the old woman from the closet into which I had stashed her with the threat of death if she made a sound. All three have since left the house, abandoned it to be my crypt. They even took the basket of cakes. A girl, a woodsman, and an old woman, the three people I saw running away. But why were they here? Why was the old woman in a closet? And what of this basket of cakes? Perhaps he was delirious from his mortal wounds? I had many questions, but the wolf's time was short. I bade him to continue. The pain is intense. I am dizzy, my breaths are labored. And still I feel the hunger in my belly, the hunger that made me stop the girl in the woods, attracted at first by the scent of the cakes she carried, then the sight of her bright red-hooded cloak. As she neared my hiding place in the thick brush, the aroma of her flesh was too much for me to bear. Aside from a few stray hares and squirrels, I hadn't eaten much for weeks. The forest, once teeming with prey, has been overhunted. I myself narrowly escaped bullets and arrows numerous times. Yet I, like the hunters themselves, became greedy. When I approached her, my plan was simple. I would consume her whole and then eat the cakes as dessert. But I didn't want to attract hunters and others by her screams, so I decided I would approach gently, calmly, and speak to her in a friendly manner. With her guard down, I would then lunge at her, clasp my jaws around her neck, feel the juice spurt into my mouth where my sharp teeth punctured her veins, and then swallow her small body, using my throat muscles to guide her nutritious organs and tissues down into my empty stomach. That was my initial plan. A villainous plan indeed, I said to the dying canine, but surely a wolf must have meat, that is understandable enough. My expressing sympathy for his motivation was an early attempt to gain his trust. I now fear it sounds insincere, like a journalist's ploy to get a telling quote for his story. Again, despite his receding strength, I implored the wolf to resume his testimony. The young girl startled me, though, by willingly engaging me in conversation. She told me that she was on the way to her grandmother's house, that the cakes were intended for the old woman. Incredibly, the innocent waif even told me where the house was located. That should have been the end of it, but as I said, I got greedy. Why eat one girl and a few cakes when I could have the girl and a woman and the cakes as well? With such a feast, I could then go several days without worrying about when I would eat my next meal. I could even save the cakes for later. It was the double shot of protein that I desperately needed to maintain my strength to survive in this depleted forest. So I wished the girl a merry journey and raced to her grandmother's house as fast as I could. To gain entry, I imitated the girl's lilting voice, and once inside, I forced the old woman into the closet. Again, I could have eaten her then and there and been done with it, but greediness was my undoing. I wanted it all, and so I sought to take the woman's place in her bed and fool the child when she entered. When the girl arrived, though, things began to unravel. I asked her to get into bed with me, which she did, but then she began asking me all these questions. Clearly, she was suspicious of me, and I was growing impatient with her. I must say I was impressed. Such cunning from a wild animal. This goes beyond mere instinct, I thought to myself. There is evil intention here. He intended to play with them as a cat does a mouse. Interesting, I thought. At the same time, I realized I could easily have stumbled upon this house and found much more blood and much less bleeding flesh, as the wolf would have taken his enormous feast and left little more than the girl's red cloak unconsumed. That idea unnerved me, yet I strove to keep up appearances. He continued. I could only take so much of her questioning before my hunger demanded I take action. When finally she asked why my teeth were so big and I answered her, quite honestly in fact, she leapt out of the bed. Unfortunately, the claws in one of my hind paws caught on the blankets, and rather than lunge at the girl, I ended up sprawled on the floor trying to free my foot. Her shrieks were heard by the nearby woodsman, and just as I recovered, he attacked me with his weapon. I fell again to the floor, whereupon the old woman's cries were heard, and she was released from her temporary prison. As they left the house, I heard the girl call me a big bad wolf, but I was only hungry and greedy, I suppose. Since when are those capital offenses? Now all that remains is my weakening body, lying in a pool of my own blood, relating this sad tale and waiting to die. And die he did under my impotent gaze. This was my first of what I hoped would be numerous encounters with villains, And already I was learning that my mission would be more ethically challenged than I had surmised. There was nothing I could do to save the wolf, but if I could have saved him and he later sought revenge, I could be an accomplice to his crimes. I decided then that whatever happened, whatever evil acts I might come across, I would not interfere. I was only to take down the villain's story and accept any rationale given for the deed that had been done. I was neither judge nor jury, but merely a collector of stories for whatever good it might do me or anyone else. The end.
Thank you very much, Jason. I would like to move on to the next contributor to tonight, Felicia Ryan. Felicia produces and hosts Hi Felicia podcast. If you love true crime, you've probably never heard of it because it is a conversation show with different artists, coaches, writers, teachers, and community folks in the Malden area. The podcast can be found on podcasty things like Podbean, Spotify, and social media places she might begrudgingly keep up with. Her introvert ventures out 2 times per month, September, May, for the Malden Writers Collaborative, where she puts on real clothes and sometimes wears a bra. She has performed her short stories and poems at various open mics, including her mass mouth storytelling class recital at Club Pessim in Cambridge, Mass. While on stage, she was nervous and kept her hands in her pockets so that it looked like she was punching herself in the legs. She believes the applause was loud, in part because the audience felt sorry for her. She lives with a handsome, tall guy who wildly waves his paws when talking and has knocked the glasses off her face in his enthusiasm. He would kill at Jeopardy if the categories were 70s prog rock, baseball, and Guy Fieri. Other cohabitats include a teenager who is secretly building something / plotting our deaths with washi tape, glue sticks, and cardboard boxes. Life signs are confirmed by evidence of open drawers, all the good snacks are eaten, wet towels on the floor, and a visible fog of coconut beach spray lingering in the air. She also shares the couch with the farty end of a brindle greyhound named Arnie, who loves crispy bread and thankfully keeps all the occupants safe from doorbells on the TV. Oh yeah, Felicia is writing a historical memoir called Colors of Me, where all the chapters are stories having to do with different colors. And in the words of fellow writer Peter Chan, the literary effects transcend tone, mood, and category. She thanks Peter, writer Peter, not brother Peter, all her imaginary fans, and her fellow writers in this group who help make her work better every year. Felicia, please join and share your stories.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everyone. So I write prose, poetry, and short stories. They are based on my life. Some of them involve adult topics. So I would just suggest, I think Jean from the library has said this in the past, that if there are kids watching, you might just want to have them not watch right now. It does involve a sort of adult subject matter. It doesn't mean it's not funny or interesting. It's just more adult than anything. So my first one is a poem. And one of the feedback we always used to give to the other writers if they included a quote or a poem at the beginning of their work was make your own. So I took that advice to heart. And so this work is a poem that starts my series called Blue. Blue is the color of her year. I admire my father's gray blue eyes as he looks at my mother. They have a mood more than a color. His eyes are the ocean as a storm rolls in, sad, lonely, dramatic, and full of stories. Blue is the color of her favorite sweater. It's the one reportedly stolen by a nurse. I find it at the bottom of her closet in a pile of dirty clothes. Did you look in the closet? I asked. She responds as if she is reminiscing. Why would I look for something when I don't know where it is? Navy blue is the color of the fuzzy blanket that I bought for her nursing home bed because she's always cold. She has shrunken down to a small bag of misshapen bones and white hair. I don't wear a lot of blue. It's not a color that looks good on me, or so she has told me. Blue suppresses your appetite. There are not many foods that are blue, so our brains tell us to stop eating. Now you're trying to think of blue food. I rented a car once that was a douchey, bright blue color, like the color of a Slurpee. At the time, it felt embarrassingly obvious. Now I'm self-conscious of the increasing complexity of my coffee order, but I order it anyways. Blue is the child of two parent colors, cyan and magenta. Every Zoom call with my mom, she tells Dad and I how much she likes the blue fruit pattern on the wallpaper behind our heads. She doesn't remember that she picked it out. Whenever someone tells me their favorite color is blue, I think of her. Pantone announced at the beginning of the year, classic blue is the color of the year for 2020. Perhaps this will be her year. The next piece is called Drift Away. We send our trash to other countries on large barges. It's the way the Western world exploits developing countries. A little factoid from my high school social studies class that I retained. I liked my teacher, but I hated the class. I was a decent student, smart with capacities, just a little lazy. So I would only put in effort if I had an interest in something. I went to private Catholic school and we had to wear blue polyester vests and skirts. They were horrendous. The uniforms were supposed to equalize us socially so that no one could use their money to stand out. It was sort of Marxist. You could still tell who had money from their haircuts, jewelry, or shoes. I think one of the reasons why social studies didn't particularly capture my imagination at 13 was because it seemed vague and involved politics. Politics were firstly avoided and in my home. Anyone involved in politics in my mother's eyes was purposely drawing attention to themselves. Well, who do they think they are? My mother would say in a huff about someone engaged in their dirty pursuit. Ego-driven activities were punishable by exile. The lesbian softball coach who lived down the street had lax personal hygiene and unkempt home and was an elected official. How these things fit together was unclear to me, but it seemed to vex my mother to a raging boil. Other rules of the household: holding a grudge was elevated to Olympic level competition. Transgressions were never forgiven. Conflict was avoided and never resolved, not even a discussion. Once a topic was dropped, it was never brought back up. It was like trash thrown out of a speeding car window. It got smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror and couldn't be found again, even if we circled back. Now I can understand why my dad drove around one full winter in a car that would only go forward. When it finally got stuck in the driveway, I thought he would have to have it fixed, but he just called the tow truck driver to pull it out of the driveway. And in the process, the car door got wedged into a snowbank and bent past the hinge. My dad just pushed the door back into place, tied it to the car with a rope, and if we could drive forward, we could go somewhere. We were driven to crave forward motion in my family. Anyway, social studies was boring and vague. I was solidly a C student. I think the teacher underestimated my intelligence, mistaking my disinterest for lack of ability. I was floating through class. The social studies teacher was compelling in my moody teenager eyes since he was charismatic and wore skinny ties and vintage clothes. He had a soul patch and would sing Sun Ra lyrics walking up and down the classroom aisles, waving a yardstick in his hands. He wrote for the Styles section of the Boston Globe and knew a good deal about pop culture. He seemed to be interested in the drama of our lives. He let us hang out in his classroom after school, and he wanted to know who was dating whom, what movies we watched, and what music we listened to. Years later, he happened to live in the same neighborhood as the college I went to. As a poor college student, I was always looking for the opportunity to make extra money, so I babysat for his son. His son was a sweet little boy with a shock of red hair and liked to have his back rubbed while he fell asleep. I was invited to sample from the different kinds of wine that my former teacher and his wife had in the refrigerator. I explored the home and found he had a framed collage of matchbooks from different clubs he had been to. He asked me to read some of the pages of a book he was working on about jazz musicians. I felt special that I had been invited into this cool adult world. He invited me out one night to talk about my writing since I had submitted a few pieces to a local newspaper. He took me for a drink at the Rattlesnake Bar in Boston. He held my hand to help me walk over the ice. We smoked a joint. And when he drove me home, I invited him in. There was an expectation. It was heavy like my winter coat. It was important for me not to disappoint him. I wanted to be cool and continue to enjoy this status as his peer. He was my rapist. I was in deep water. I had no idea there were sharks. A memory came to me, a kid in high school telling me about this teacher was a creep. I wasn't sure I believed this kid since he was always in trouble. He asked me, "Why do you think he's always interested in having you hang out after class?" These prophetic words were ringing in my head. I looked down. I was so proud of the blue flats I had on. They were the ones I had painted by hand in my parents' basement. My blue pinstriped crop pants and my pink eyelet sweater were a little too early in the season for this type of weather. I was not exactly oozing sexy. I had been taught that your safety was in direct correlation to your clothing during a night out. I loved this outfit, but it had failed me. I focused on the crack in the ceiling and the light fixture. It was missing a light bulb. I tried following the crack all the way to the end. It was a river that never met an ocean. It just faded into nothing. I followed the crack over and over, looking for its outlet. When I was showering afterwards, I started thinking that something bad like this happens to other people. But now it was me. I folded up the sheets with the intention of not just washing them, but throwing them away. I wanted to forget the whole thing ever happened. Everything he touched in the room, I threw away. I took out all the trash. He called me and believed we were starting an affair. We would have more dates like this, like the last one. He knew a special restaurant he wanted to take me to. I told him that he was sleazy. My whole body was shaking. I seethed and I told him he was never going to call me again. I was spitting the words into the phone. If he tried, I would call and tell his wife. I couldn't believe I was threatening him. I was holding back the tears. Standing with my back to the ocean, and I knew a crushing wave was coming up behind me. He sent me a card with a sailboat on it. He wrote, "I hope you return to normal soon." Like I had had a seizure or a stroke, and I just needed some time to recover my speech and hearing. Not like he had spent hours in my home, years baiting me for this outing, telling me I was special or reminding me of how sexy I was when I was 13 and wearing braces in my Catholic school uniform. Even now I can feel the revulsion. He almost permanently tainted my image of myself. How could I have thought of him as my mentor or someone who recognized my specialness? I reluctantly told my boyfriend at the time, and he was unsympathetic and blamed me. He reinforced my feeling of ineptness. He lowered my opinion of myself. I had invited him in, and it was my fault. Just drift away. People throw thousands of tons of trash in the ocean. We imagine it just drifts away to some place we will never see. The ocean always brings it back again. It hangs on to it for us and for a while and then spews it back again after a cleansing storm. I have one other piece, and it's a lighter piece, so hopefully it's a good bookend. It's called Trapped in My Yoga Top. I like the lying down poses at the end of yoga. I know you're supposed to enjoy the whole class, but for right now, I like the ones I can do on the floor. Too much stuff hurts and my flexibility is shit these days. I feel like when I sit cross-legged that my hip flexors will snap like a Barbie doll whose rubber bands have gotten old and brittle. Back when I had no issues sitting crisscross applesauce, I used to be a singer. I enjoyed the expression of it until the chorus teacher told me I couldn't sing because I was unable to find the right key in Happy Birthday. Now in yoga class, I have started to enjoy the collective Om at the end, rediscovering my voice. I like the feeling of having a bird in a cage in my chest. I like the buzzing and humming echoes around in my skull, and it allows me to feel present and scooped out like a melty serving of ice cream in its bowl. Now at home, trying to find my way out of damp clothes, I'm counteracting all the good feels with negative self-talk, which is not very yogi of me. So you finally dragged me out to exercise. Yeah, it was only yoga class, but I think it counts as in the win column. This is what you get. Now you're stuck in your yoga top forever. That bitch is back whispering in my ears again. The yoga top is a light robin's egg blue. It's one of those built-in shelf bra. I choose it for the color so that it looks nice under the peekaboo back of my other special yoga top. I know it's a cliche, but going to yoga is also an excuse to buy clothes for the occasion. I tell myself it helps to motivate me to go. Now the top is like a snake wrapping around my moist body. With each wriggle, it tightens its grip. The tightness in my chest and shallow breathing are increasing since the top is stuck midway across my chest, hooked under my armpits. I can feel my armpit fat mocking me. Does Lizzo worry about armpit fat? I need to practice my hair toss and check my nails on that bullshit. I struggle trying to reach my upper scapula. In humans, the shoulder blades are the defunct wing bones. If we were birds, it would allow us to fly. Now I'm just a seagull trapped in a fishing net. Even with my arms folded in half, I can't reach the back fully to release the elastic band and move it over the bones. The top clings to me with the commitment of a dying man. I'm sweating again from the struggle. It re-moistens my skin and increases the adherence to the top of my chest. There is no wiggle room. This has a hold of me. I dressed for yoga with the mindset that I didn't want to look too good, so no makeup. But I curled my hair and purposefully selected a gray hairband with blue flecks. I wanted to seem like I was trying, but just rolled up fresh, color coordinated. Totes cray cray, I know. Whether I have done yoga today or not, I wanted it to seem like I'd been going for years, with all the poses familiar, and I was not too challenged, but just challenged enough. We suffer in silence. We don't ask for help or draw attention to ourselves. This is the Ryan motto, above the crest of martyr. I feel like a wounded animal, leaving a trail of blood, and the hunters are tracking me. I don't think it's a head wound. It's more like a slash to the haunch of one of my legs. I can still move, but I have a limp. With every step, I leave little droplets of blood. The blood trail alerts the hunter how to find me, and then I'm not whole. The hunter is fear. Panic. I'm breathing quickly and my mind is racing. Now I can hear myself breathing. I'm sweating more. This is getting away from me. All the fears are talking now. I am afraid I will never make enough money to feel secure. I'm afraid I'm not good enough to make a career change and will forever cling to my safety net job. I'm afraid that people will disappoint me if I rely on them. I'm afraid I'm not strong enough to make any changes in my life. I'm afraid I'll be too hard and I'll give up and I'll just lie on the floor. I'm afraid my health will never get any better. I'm afraid I will never have any answers on how to fix my pain. I'm afraid that my love will fade. I'm afraid I'm not good enough to call myself creative. I'm afraid there'll never be another season of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. These limiting beliefs haunt me and come from an exposed wound. I poke at it. Can I be both the hunter and the prey? Can I hold both fear and ambition at the same time? Will I ever get my arms out of the T-Rex position? I am unique in my family for my forthrightness and doggedness. I won't take no for an answer. My parents did not instill this in me. I came out of my mother's body wanting more. My parents reminded me every day growing up of my limitations. They cautioned me about all possible dangers. They didn't want me to stand out. Their attitude about the world was simply that it was a dangerous place. They wanted me to wear the team jersey and toe the party line. Perhaps another reason I was not good at team sports unless I could be an individual contributor. Think gymnastics, softball, theater. Before you roll your eyes, theater is a sport, physicality, group-oriented, rules, there's dancing. Now imagine instead of some old fat white guys chatting about Brady needs to retire, blah, blah, blah. An eclectic bunch of us are, okay, dream team theater, production of MAME, who is your pick? And people calling in and arguing Rosalind Russell versus Angela Lansbury. I'm wriggling my upper torso trying to move this top when I remember scissors. I remind myself that scissors should be carefully considered. Scissors call to me when I find my hair bothers me. It might fall the wrong way, or when I wear a hoodie and the wisps sneak out and brush up against my face and ears. Sometimes strays get in my mouth, wisps of hair get caught in my eyebrows and make their way into my eyes. I keep brushing it back with my hands and it feels like swiping at spider webs. You think you got it, but somehow it lingers behind. It's a ghost of a memory or just a lingering sensation of one. And I go hunting for the scissors. Actually, that's an exaggeration. I know exactly where the scissors are. I hide them from my boyfriend's 13-year-old daughter since she's constantly stealing them, but I know exactly where they are. Scissors are in the bathroom on the top of the vanity, in my desk drawer towards the back, on top of the microwave, tucked into an old bin of silverware just out of sight. I also keep a sharp pair in my crafting travel kit. I trim the split ends with those. When my hair is tormenting me, I stare at myself in the mirror, contemplating a change, and I think, bangs? This is a phone a friend situation. Whenever any woman contemplates bangs, she should be talked out of it. Unless you're a little French pixie Amelie cute, then go on with your bad self. But my bangs reflex is exclusively a mistake. I text my hairdresser, who is also a friend and a very astute human observer. She talks me off the ledge. She encourages me to find patience and assures me that she will help me make my hair more manageable. She can fix any mistakes I make. I want this to apply to all areas of my life. The yoga top could almost come off, but it's rolled up, stuck under my armpits. I was able to release my breasts, but my arms are stuck in the upright position, like a flamenco dancer. And my dog is watching all of this with a puzzled look on his face. I'm almost out of the top and I can feel that familiar feeling of must keep going. I am rabid in my pursuit of moving forward. I don't like to have to circle back over well-traveled ground. It's not that I don't like the familiar or traditional. I just like to know what my environs are, and my inner hunter wants to move forward. Now my dog is whining at me. He's the outward expression of my inner voice. Oh my God, I'm never going to break free. But I have, and I will. My arms are out. I slide the top over one shoulder, then over the other. And it's a single band now, soaked in sweat and humiliation. I toss it in the laundry basket and stand with my hands on my hips like a gladiator. I look down at the laundry and say, "You have served your purpose, and I am the master now." I take a victory lap around the bedroom topless, waving to the dog and making roaring crowd sounds. The end. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicia. That was as wonderful hearing it again as it was the first time. I was thinking the same thing about Jason's piece. It's a real treat for us to hear these again. I know everybody tuning in tonight is hearing them for the first time, but just the feelings that are elicited as we hear these pieces and the experiences and the way that they're crafted so wonderfully. Next reader, similarly, this piece that Rebecca will be reading from her work, Ceaseless Faith. Rebecca Brooks is a Southern transplant who moved to Malden 7 years ago. A lover of the written word, Rebecca is a high school English teacher in a nearby district. The selection she will read tonight comes from her memoir, Ceaseless Faith, a story about the struggles of raising a child with cystic fibrosis and in the enduring hope that one day CF will stand for Cure Found. Rebecca, please share your story with us.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to read tonight. I'm going to read a small selection, kind of stream of consciousness, but the inner workings of some of the decisions and the struggles that we face when looking at treatment options, but also bigger struggles in this world of CF. My daughter is actually trying to go to bed right now, so you may hear her in the background, so I apologize in advance. But I very much appreciate the opportunity to have a little bit of our story shared. Writing for me is a catharsis. It helps get out what I'm feeling and helps me work through what we're dealing with. And in addition to that, I find that sharing stories is a great way of spreading awareness and building empathy. So I am going to share a small story about deciding whether we should start a breakthrough treatment that works at the cellular level called Orkambi, that was developed in just south of where I am in Boston at Vertex. So enjoy. Thanks again for the opportunity. Orkambi. So many thoughts raced through my mind as I laced up my shoes and checked the battery life on my phone. I needed to run through this decision and all of its possibilities before I could feel comfortable. This is something that would drastically affect my daughter's body, my daughter's life, and she would be the one living with the consequences of my decision. I thought of T.S. Eliot's famous line that in a minute there is time for decisions and revisions which a minute will reverse. I needed to run, and my goal was to make it to the bridge today, maybe even cross it. After turning up the volume on my earbuds, I opened the Map My Run app on my phone, pressed play, and hit the pavement. My breath steadied as they synced with the beat of the music. My arms started to sway in time, and my legs adjusted to a quicker, longer stride. Just breathe. Only a few weeks ago, Cadence celebrated her 2nd birthday, so this news was like a belated birthday present. It must have been a sign that on the 2-year anniversary of my daughter's diagnosis, Orkambi was granted FDA approval for children as young as 2. This was the breakthrough medicine that showed promise in extending the lives of patients living with cystic fibrosis. This was the news we had been waiting for the past 2 years. So why was it so difficult to decide whether Cadence should start taking Orkambi? As I settled into my base pace, I wondered whether insurance would even cover this very expensive medication, and if so, how many hoops we would have to jump through to get Orkambi. Doctor letters, prior authorizations, eye exams, preliminary blood work, appeals, phone calls, more letters, contact Compass. The list goes on. How much of this $250,000 a year price tag would we have to pay? How much will our primary insurance cover? How much will her mass health disability cover? What would we do if one insurance approves this medication but not the other? Do I have the strength within me to battle these insurance companies? We already have the daily battle against CF, so why should I have to fight with those who are supposed to work with us in caring for our daughter? Why should I have to fight to get this medication covered, a medication that could potentially prevent the horrific damage that CF can cause? The pain in my heel had returned. My pace slowed, just as my Map My Run app alerted me of my progress. Distance, 1 mile. Time, 11 minutes, 41 seconds. Though this was one of my faster first miles, I didn't want to overdo it on speed to the point that I couldn't go the distance. I needed to get to the bridge. I settled into a slower pace for the 2nd mile as my mind listed Orkambi's potential side effects: exhaustion, nausea, gas, diarrhea, rash, cold and flu symptoms, runny or stuffy nose, sinus pain, sore throat, shortness of breath. These did not scare me. Abnormality of the eye lens causing cataracts. That scared me. If we decided to put Cadence on this medication, she would have to see an eye doctor regularly to check for any signs of developing abnormalities. I'm not even sure how common or rare it is for people taking this drug to develop cataracts, but is that a risk I'm willing to take? If she is one of the unlucky ones to develop cataracts, thankfully there is a simple common surgery to correct them. Am I willing to risk the possibility of Cadence undergoing minor cataract surgery in order to potentially prevent the more serious double lung transplant down the road? No parent should ever have to weigh those odds. My endorphins had kicked in, for I no longer felt the pain in my heel. I had found my stride, and I needed to keep going if I wanted to make it to the bridge. My thoughts returned to Orkambi. Another side effect listed is high liver enzymes in the blood, which could be a sign of liver injury. That scared me. Only 6 months ago, Cadence's blood work had already shown an elevation in her liver enzymes. After a liver ultrasound, which showed a healthy, normal-looking liver, the hepatologist started Cadence on Ursodiol as a preventative medicine. The doctor's wording was that it was a benign medicine, so no harm in putting our toddler on it now. Of course, for Cadence's size, the medicine would have to be compounded, and the only compounding pharmacy that could do this was 45 minutes away in Waltham. Thankfully, they offered free delivery, and apparently the compounded drug did the trick. Since starting Ursodiol, Cadence's blood work had shown her liver enzymes were back to a stable, more normal range. Do we want to risk going through that scare again? Is the risk worth it? With starting Orkambi, we would have to do blood work every 3 months for the first year on this medication to keep an eye on her liver enzymes. Expert doctors would be on the lookout for anything that could show potential liver issues, and we could stop the medicine before any real detrimental damage would be done. Are the benefits of this medication worth putting my 2-year-old through so many blood draws? I don't want her to develop the same needle phobia I have. What if we start this miracle breakthrough treatment only to discover it causes liver damage and we have to stop treatment? Do I want to have the hope that this treatment will work only to be dashed with the possible reality of liver problems? If we start this medication, then have to stop, that would mean that we would be back to square one. Since the next generation of CFTR modulators contain one of the medications in Orkambi and list the same side effects, this could potentially mean that if Cadence can't tolerate Orkambi, she may not be able to tolerate the more successful drugs when they become available for her age. While others with CF will get groundbreaking treatment, we may not be able to join in that celebration. We will have to endure the long wait for a different treatment, watching others improve while our daughter's body slowly deteriorates on the inside. Map My Run thankfully interrupted this downward spiral. Distance, 2 miles. Pace, 12 minutes, 13 seconds. I could see the bridge up ahead, its frame enveloped in a dense fog that had settled over the river. My pace slowed as I considered whether I would cross that bridge and go further on my run than ever before, whether my body was ready to be pushed beyond its usual limits. I also wondered if I was ready to take the next step in my daughter's care. I had weighed many of the cons, but I hadn't considered the pros. The doctors explained that starting Orkambi this young could prevent much of the damage that CF can cause as it progresses with time, that while there are serious side effects to consider, we won't know whether Cadence will experience any of them unless we start the medication. If she did have any side effects, various medical experts were keeping a watchful eye, and we could stop the medication at the first sign of trouble. But the most significant persuasion came from our daughter's pulmonologist. At our last clinic visit, she clearly stated that if this was her own child, she would start Orkambi. My grandmother's favorite scripture ran through my thoughts. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. I can't ceaselessly worry over dangers that may never come, for we won't know until we try. I took a breath, checked the lacing of my shoes, and picked up my pace as I headed across the bridge and into the fog. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Next up, reading will be Jason Kenny. Jason joined the group this year. In his first year, he carved out quite a nice little space for himself. He contributed early and often in writing prompts, and he contributed a manuscript this year called No Sign of the Morning. Tonight, Jason will be reading to you from that manuscript. Jason, please come up and share your story with us.
Okay. Chapter 1. Every guide will tell you that they created the world with the unnamable sky. Logos would suggest that zero or more gods must be lying. However, Logos herself has claimed to have thought the universe into form. Meravid Meg Shushtani. The warm tomb welcomed Mariam. She walked into the foyer with a spring in her step. The wisp lanterns activated. The jackal-headed guardian golems dipped their steel spears in salute. The northern wall had the black Kuma'at marble embalming bench, replaced when the original cracked under great-great-great-aunt Sothi's weight. Above it all was a mosaic. The sun-haloed goddess, bringer of the dawn, enthroned and attended to her by jackal guardians. Mariam walked past the foyer and further into the catacomb. Wisp lanterns flickered on with her approach. The walls rose up beyond the edge of their light into darkness. She felt small, an insignificant epilogue to the shelves upon shelves filled with a resting family. No, Mariam fortified herself. This time was different. Mariam made sure the mead was hanging tree honey wine, cask aged for 16 years. She brought up her math scores. That required sacrificing the rotting cat concert and her war golem games. Mariam felt proud. The spring in her step resumed. Mariam passed the ossuary. Inside that room would be an uncountable pile of family fragments, except not Nefertiti. Her mother was resting on her shelf. Salutations, mother. Mariam caressed her mother's wooden face mask. I brought your favorite Varangian honeywan. A suffocating disappointment snuffed Mariam's speech out. Mariam could feel the question. Yes, I am wearing a cloak. Yes, the mink fur one, Mariam said. Oh, I brought my grades. I did well on... Did you bring a cat? Her mother's obsessive insistence burrowed into Mariam's skull. No, I did not bring a cat. What happened to the last one? Instead of her mother's praise and pride pouring into her, hope bled out. Her mother wanted another cat. Emptiness exuded inside her. Yes, a black one. I will try and get a black one. No, I don't have a boyfriend. Her mother's disappointment poured down on her. No, I didn't take dance this year. She took dance since her first year. Her teacher would say she excelled at solo dances. Oh, it's New Year. Happy New Year, mother dearest, Mariam said with a sour tone. Mariam poured the mead into a large tall glass. She held her breath and drank the mead sweetness down her gullet, and then exhaled her bitter feelings. I know, I'm horrible. Mariam felt no contradiction from her mother. She filled another glass and downed it. I can pour another. Warmth hit her arms, her legs, and last her head. I hate gravity eloped with her wits. It is the last hour of the last day of the 5-day period between years. A time of uncertainty, when the nights are the longest and coldest, when the red eye of the unnamable sky's malice is brightest. The Near of Kuma'at took pilgrimage to their family tombs in the Valley of the Queens. They brought mead and jewelry, acquired cats and strawberries. The families honored their dead and celebrated the bringer of the dawn's glorious triumph over the unnamable sky and the forces of chaos. It was also the most profitable day for retail. Mariam awoke on the stone floor. A cleaning golem bumped her face as it vacuumed up her vomit. Pain burned behind her eyelids. Happy Pilgrimage Day, Mother, she said. Mariam could feel the disappointment of the dead. She knelt down, faced east, dry heaved several times and prayed. May I have power in my heart. May I have power in my arms. May I have power in my mouth. Bringer of the dawn. Much beloved, red of hair. O sun throne, banish the unnamable sky. I submit myself before you. Bring us out of darkness, light the external path. May I have power in my legs. May I have power in my eyes. May I have power over our enemies. Outside the tomb was an overcast day. Sweeper golems ensured the crowded streets remained free of snow. She hunched over and vomited. Other families rushed past Mariam. Mariam's home was across the river. After the war, her entire neighborhood was rebuilt. During summer, tourists would visit the many emptied houses decorated with never-used furniture. The doors to her lobby slid open. I am sorry, Mariam. Horace, her family golem, greeted. Mariam took off her cloak. Horace took it. She sat on a bench and raised her feet. Horace unlaced and pulled off each boot. Mariam walked into the bathing room. She remained silent when Horace followed her, raised her arms when Horace undressed her, and walked into the pool so Horace could bathe her. Mariam sat on her rocking chair. Horace brought her lined coffee from Enoch, with cinnamon, ginger, and nutmeg sprinkled on whipped cream, and 2 spoons of honey. Lapis, her cat, trilled her presents and pounced to her lap. Mariam stroked Lapis and stared at the wall-high glass windows overlooking the city, the black empty farmland and the river beyond. Mariam's cheeks were wet. She could taste their salt. They could not be tears. Horace must have forgotten to dry her face after the bath. Women did not cry. Chapter 2. And so it was, after 40 years of wandering, Enoch led her people to a lake in the land between the 2 seas. There they made camp, and on the morning the cry went out, "Look, as foreseen by the seer Enoch, for there lay the turkey eating the serpent," and the people rejoiced, for this was where they would settle, and that city was named Enoch, the book of Enoch. Last year, Mariam's mother had Horace reserve an illusionist hall for Mariam's birthday. Her classmates were all invited. First, the illusion room with an enchanted labyrinth led to an epic dungeon crawl, ending with a dragon. It was all fake, including the friendship. When it came time to serve cakes and flatbread, her party had split and wandered off to each of their cliques. Mariam sat at the head table alone, viewing the others as if watching a motion picture on a large clear mirror. This year had just been as isolated. When Mariam's school resumed, she remained at the empty table. Without War Golem, Mariam wasn't certain if she had spoken to anyone outside of Lapis and Toth, the teaching golem. On the sunrise of her birthday, Mariam walked out for her own private party. The wooden train platform would be empty. Now arriving, the Immersal line to Rakote, Enoch, and Immersal. The next Immersal line train will arrive in 13 minutes. There was no sound nor vibration. The train was a smooth granite cylinder on a single magnetic trap that strapped without a squeak. There was no exhale of exhaust. Ley lines flickered blue for less than a moment. The door slid open and Mariam queued into the train car. The Enoch station survived the war. Columns of polished obsidian reached beyond the light. Mirrors hung above her. They displayed the time travel table for each platform. A mirror depicted a shirtless man on a settee with cream on his lip, advertised Logan's handmade cream. Another mirror with bare back and prominent shoulders advertised Edith's son's handmade furniture. Mariam stopped her staring and walked off the platform. The air carried the warming flood season sea. Enoch was a labyrinth of colossal ziggurats, golem-cleaned plazas, gondola-filled canals, and leafed-out sycamores and willow trees. Mirrors advertised fashion, jewelry, or the latest moving picture. They came from the sky. Mariam overheard a classmate once say, "You should always take a boy to see a horror film." "Why?" Mariam asked. Her classmate, she didn't recall her name, looked surprised, either at Mariam's question or that Mariam existed. "Because they'll cling to you," she had replied. Mariam found that watching a horror movie alone, with a hangover, surrounded by couples, despite the world's largest screen, was unpleasant. After the movie, Mariam waited on the Enoch platform. She thought of how insignificant and small she was under the unreachable ceiling. Now arriving, the Immersal line to Rakote, Wasat, Karak, and Shiraz. The next Immersal line will arrive in 13 minutes. Mariam looked at the monorail between the platforms. If she fell, would anyone hold her back? Would the train stop? Would she die when the magic hit her, or live long enough for her body to be smashed by the train? Would she get crushed? Would her bones break? Would they slice out with bits of her limbs flying onto the platform? Would anyone avoid her splatter? The trains arrived, and Mariam queued with the crowd into the train car. Mariam sat in her window. She watched the golems water the wheat fields in full golden splendor. She stroked Lapis, Happy birthday to me, Mariam said. She flipped Lapis on her back and rubbed the soft fur of her belly. Lapis curled herself around Mariam's hand, righted herself, and jumped off. Mariam watched her cat stalk off. Mariam picked out a mirror game from the scroll rack. The battered, dog-eared scroll she pulled out was for fate. Mariam walked. Wait a moment. Yep. Yep. That's why. There's nothing more humiliating than the helplessness of love. Meravid Meg Shustani. The dying of the leaves heralded the coming of the flood. Mariam sat by the window, stroking Lapis. Outside, the vast wheat fields by the horizon were harvested by large golems. These giant golems had 4 arms and 4 legs. 2 arms scythed the wheat, the other two placed it in the basket. Mariam, you need to register today, Horace said. Mariam shook in surprise. Lapis jumped off. Can you hand me the mirror? Mariam, Rakote University requires in-person registration. Mariam pushed up, sighed. Horace dressed her and handed her an umbrella. I am sorry, Mariam. Mariam walked the leaf-strewn streets. Was there a point? If she skipped, her mother would chastise her for wasting her scholarship. If she went and did well, her mother would ignore her and find one of her other faults. Mariam's breast paused. Her mind stopped. Ginger curled locks hung over a bare, pale shoulder. A spring pine patterned dress. These objects pushed her thoughts away. When her thoughts restarted, Mariam noticed these objects coalesced into a person, a boy sitting on the train. He was reading a book, not one in a mirror, but a paper and leather-bound book. Mariam had found herself sitting next to the boy. She didn't remember stepping onto the station or entering the train. Panic. Did she get on the right train? The mirror displaying next stop Rakote reassured her. Her mind flailed in the warmth flushing her cheeks. What are you reading? She found herself asking. He smiled. A shrapnel shot of energy exploded in her stomach and its fragments bounced in her gut. Newt's Art of Magic Volume 1, he said. She was surprised. The boy was interested in magic. Are you a witch? We're touring the academy today. Wow, that was all she could say. A hollow pit formed in her gut. Her mind drowned in the silence. I got into the academy. I'm registering for classes today. I'm wondering if taking infinitesimals and natural philosophy will be too much. And then there's the academy. Alchemy, numeric poetry, but everyone's required to take letters and humanities. And Mariam rambled. He had a wonderful smile, and his hair. Mariam wanted to run her hands through it. It looked so soft. He looked so small and vulnerable. She wondered if she could wrap just one arm around his waist. Now arriving at Rakote Station, the automated announcer said. Do you have a personal golem? No, he said. How would she contact him? We could trade glyphs, maybe even play online. She preferred black brush. Here. He took the brush and on Mariam's arm tried to draw. One moment, she whispered. In the name of the rune giver, I command thee. He wrote his mirror glyphs on her arm. I gotta go. The boys rose up. Good luck. Her dejection drained away. She wanted to punch the air. She wanted to hug him. She walked off the train. Invalid glyph, please try again. Mariam was angry. She wanted to punch the mirror. Not that it would help. She did not need to explain to Mother why she had to replace the home mirror a second time. Why did he give her a fake glyph? He could have just said no. What did she do? Lapis interrupted her thoughts. The cat trilled as she ran into the room. Mariam imagined it was cat 4. Behold, I am Lapis, mighty cat. Will you pet me? She paced her room. Lapis sprinted into her legs and then dashed to the chair. Did she smell? Her deodorizing amulet was still working. Did he see her crooked teeth? No, it couldn't be that. Meow. Lapis dashed again and jumped on the bed. Mariam stopped. What? The cat blinked her left eye, then stretched. Mariam picked her up and cradled her. Lapis batted Mariam's nose. Mariam sat on her bed and rested Lapis on her lap. She caressed Lapis's front right paw, each pad, each claw tip. Mariam looked out the window. She stroked Lapis. She had lost the boy on the platform. She didn't see him on the tram up to the academy. She's worried he got lost. Maybe the entire academy bit was the fake. No. Why else would he visit Rakode? Art of Magic was too expensive and controversial a prop. She remembered boys who liked magic or wargone were often bullied by girls. She continued to stroke Lapis, watched the sun go down. Her classes were registered, her textbooks were bought. And on her mirror, her horse golem would order moleskin-bound notepads, a cauldron, and get a lease for an apartment near the academy. She rubbed Lapis' belly, letting her soft fur get caught in between her finger. Lapis purred for a few moments, and then, in a mad ball of cat, shut off again, out of the room. I love you, cat. The morning after Mariam sat in her chair by her window, she watched the wind blow up red, yellow, and purple leaves. She ate a slice of coffee ice cream cake, followed by a glass of mead. Her lap was empty. Lapis, she called out. Silence. Lapis? The cat did not come. The water bowl was full. Did she let the cat out this morning? Horace, please locate Lapis. Horace's voice came from the mirror. Lapis is in the tomb. What? A pit of cold sadness opened in her stomach. Mariam saw the mirror. Lapis was on the embalming table. She was still, her eyes open, unblinking. Silence. Lapis. Lapis was gone. Mariam stood there. I need to proceed with the embalming. Do you wish to watch? No. Lapis was gone. I am sorry, Mariam. And I will stop there.
Thank you so much, Jason. That was wonderful. Our next reader tonight is Heather Angel. Heather was born in Malden and returned to the area as an adult. She has been a member of the Malden Writers Collaborative for the past 4 years. I'm always excited when Heather has a contribution. Tonight, she'll be reading from A Grief Story. Heather, please share your story with us.
God, classic Zoom mistake. I was trying to find a reason to use my prop here that actually fit into the story. So what I'm going to read is an excerpt from my short story from this year called A Grief Story. It's ultimately, part of it is about this young girl's experience with her mom on hospice. And I moonlight as an aspiring writer, but my day job is as a hospice chaplain. And for the past 6 months, I've been doing that on the phone. So it feels awkwardly appropriate to tell this story to the phone. Mildred's mother was her safe haven. She bore the suffering of her alcoholic husband with a certain grace. Grace was a word Mildred's mother taught her when she was 7 and studying at their kitchen table for her first communion class. Every Friday afternoon, the second graders were marched across the parking lot into the little stone church to hear Father Riley speak. Mildred retained little, if anything, from those afternoon sermons. The older kids called him Father Snooze, except that the stained glass windows made even dust seem holy. Her real learning came from her mother. Each week, she rushed through the required workbook assignment with Mildred so she could begin her own curriculum. She laid out teachings that she wanted to be at the foundation of Mildred's understanding of her Catholic faith: grace, reconciliation, liberation, dignity, radical welcome. Mildred's mother had wanted desperately to study theology and had even been accepted into the honors program at Boston College. But her parents could not afford to send her. And then she met Mildred's father at the Pepsi plant, where she had a temp job as the second shift secretary. He was a third shift forklift operator, and that was it. The temp job became permanent. After that, she mail ordered theology books from Orbis and even drove to Worcester and Cambridge to buy boxes of cast-off by the pounds at the end of each semester from graduate students looking to recoup expenses. While most of her mother's theological ideas floated somewhere above Mildred's 7-year-old head like mystical bodies too holy for flesh, Mildred was able to grab a hold of the meaning of grace immediately. Her mother stated it clearly and with restrained exuberance. Grace is love we cannot earn. It is given freely and it is unconditional and it requires nothing in return. That's how God loves you. While God seemed like the standard bearer, Mildred found her perfect example right in front of her, for that is how Mildred's mother loved her. She was the only one that loved Mildred the way that God did. God could love her that way too if he wanted, but even God's love couldn't compare to the love of her mother. And her mother was right here at the kitchen table with half a loaf of banana bread, 2 cups of hot chocolate, a 3rd packet split between them because according to her mother, one was just never sweet enough. Her mother had told her that God's love was at the center of prayer. Mildred knew prayers she had memorized like math problems from her daily religion class. She even knew some of the catechism, which was going out of style but still taught by her 2nd grade teacher, Sister Marie. The prayers before lunch at school were rote: a hoop to jump through, a ticket to punch in order to get to juice boxes and Sal's Pizza. Mildred's mother taught her that prayer was like a green shoot. Sometimes it was leaving a bouquet of scallions in a mason jar, half filled with water, because you were told they might regrow. Sometimes it was cardboard, like the empty boxes that lined the entryway of Market Basket, offering themselves for reuse, offering themselves to be filled. And even if all you did was offer a container, offer an idea of a yard with a fence, offer a handful of dirt and seeds, that became a prayer. Not in a, hey, at least we tried kind of way, but in a, hey, I have all this space and let's try to fill it kind of way. According to Mildred's mother, God does not work spatially, but humans have always been obsessed with space, like we're all physicists, like we understand dimensions and vectors and inertia and even what a meter is, never mind an inch. We eyeball where we think God can go, not realizing God is already in the place we thought was too small or too big or too misshapen, especially when that thing is us in our messy lives. When we said, give me 30 seconds to race ahead to our cars when unexpectedly giving someone a ride home. We scoop up trash, empty teacups, books, the detritus of our commutes. God is already in the car, buckled in, asking where we should go. Mildred did not understand a lot of the words her mother said, but she understood that her mother loved to pray, that it exhilarated her and gave her life, that it was a place for her to put things. And at age 7, Mildred realized she had never really prayed. Her mother's favorite holiday was not Christmas or Easter or Mother's Day, but Holy Thursday. Mildred remembered her first Holy Thursday with her mother with a clear resonance. It was the only day of the year that they went to Mass at night, and the dark stained glass windows were at once ominous and enveloping, the way an approaching thunderstorm can sow fear and wonder at the same time. Mildred's mother said they sat in the back of the little stone church because they were good Catholics. That never made sense to Mildred, since the good kids always sat in the front of the class at school, but she never asked about it. She was just as happy to be in the back in the dark. From the beginning of the Mass, Mildred's mother would be consumed by the incense and the song. She let her voice, strong and clear like a bell, echo out and blend with the organ, which was right above their heads. After the homily, everyone who wanted to took off their shoes and socks and rolled up their pant legs and got in line. A set of 12 chairs were placed in every nook and cranny of the altar. Altar boys and girls, mostly from the 5th grade, who Mildred knew as the big kids from recess and lunchtime, were almost unrecognizable to her in their white robes, clothed in stillness and intention. They ferried clean towels and warm water in clay earthen vessels across the altar as strangers knelt down and gently scrubbed each other's feet in ceramic bowls. The little stone church was packed with people from across the diocese because of the foot washing. While most priests selected 12 men from the parish council to sit exalted on the altar, Father Riley believed in having what he called a grassroots Holy Thursday. Since his parish had a school and plenty of money in the collection basket and he didn't raise hell any other time, the diocese looked the other way and let him have his little egalitarian foot washing. The Monsignors up in Manchester had a good chuckle every Holy Thursday after their Mass at the cathedral, and kicked off the Holy Triduum with a laugh and a brandy toast to Father Riley and his feet. Since Mildred would not make her first communion for a couple more months, her mother had told her she could stay in the pew and watch. Mildred was relieved and disappointed all at the same time. A part of her wanted the strange intimacy of what was happening before her. She watched her mother barefoot and singing. When it came her turn, Mildred's mother had her bare feet washed by an older woman with her gray hair tied back in a bonnet. Then her mother knelt down and washed the feet of an old man who was in a trench coat and had a scraggly beard. When she returned to the pew, Mildred whispered to her mother, "Is that gross?" Her mother smiled at her and said, "No, it was beautiful." Mildred was about to be confirmed when her mother started to not be able to get up for Mass on Sundays. Her mom had never missed Mass, even when she got mad at Pope John Paul II for not speaking out against the civil wars that were killing thousands in Latin America, even when Father Riley gave a homily about the importance of the male priesthood, even when Bishop McCormick lagged behind other dioceses and letting girls be altar servers. By the time her mom took a day off from her job at the Pepsi factory to go into Boston for tests at her doctor's urging, it was too late. The cancer was everywhere. Mildred was almost 16 then, and her shyness had grown from a piece of clothing she could take on and off to an appendage she was not sure how to move with. It was part of her the same way the cancer was part of her mother, and she didn't know how to suss it out. After a brief time in the hospital, Mildred's mother came home on hospice, a word Mildred had never heard. Delivery men showed up in a box truck and brought in a mechanized hospital bed with a special table, a big boxy machine that plugged into the wall and gurgled day and night. They brought a backup oxygen tank that looked like pictures of the atom bomb Mildred had seen in her history book. It stood in the corner of the dining room like a harbinger of dread. It felt like an invasion. Mildred's father, who had not been around much in the past decade other than to eat dinner, start fires in the wood stove, and criticize Mildred's clothes and pear-shaped adolescent body, became like a man possessed. He slept on the floor by his wife's bed, and at night he wept in her lap. The sight of her dying mother having to comfort her absent father felt like a war crime. The hospice nurse, a kind and round-faced brunette with small hoop earrings and lots of freckles, had left a thin blue book on the coffee table called The Dying Process. Mildred quickly and surreptitiously took the book and read it every day until she memorized the signs that someone was going to die. She knew that someone was her mother. She made a vocab list of words and phrases she had never heard before and wished she could unlearn. Terminal lucidity, mottling, complicated grief. She studied them like they were homework, preparing for a test she knew she could not pass. Mildred hoped if she could get good at it, she could stop it, she could tame it, but she could not. She also could not unlearn, when left to its own devices, all the ways a body can die. After the funeral mass, when people spilled out of the little stone church onto the sidewalks of Route 97, Mildred rode in a shiny black limousine with her father to the cemetery. The funeral home had thrown the car and driver in for free. They sat in silence. Her father's suit was ill-fitting and all wrong. He had lost 30 pounds since her mother got sick and looked grim and cachectic. At the burial, men from the Pepsi factory stood in their black suits and sunglasses like they were playing dress-up for a mob movie. Her twin maiden aunts, flown in from Syracuse, bookended her father, holding up like some slouching, defrocked king. Mildred barely registered what was happening. She fixated on the gravedigger, 100 feet away, who had stopped his backhoe out of respect and was drinking a Pepsi in the sun under a tree. He had on beige Carhartt overalls with grass-stained knees. Mildred did not listen to Father Riley at the graveside that day, as he talked about dust to dust and ashes to ashes, as he read from the book of Revelation about a time where there'd be no more tears and no more sadness and how the old world would pass away. She simply watched the contrite gravedigger, like some pilgrim come to pay respects, half bowed beneath a tree. She thought of how much her mother would love that, to be mourned in silence by someone on the margins, markings of the earth and his labor on his knees. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heather. I'd like to bring our next reader up. Tonight, Jeff Taylor is here. Jeff Taylor lives in Malden. He's a poet and an editor. Jeff co-hosts a Friday open mic series on Zoom. And if you like Broken Head Press on Facebook, you can get more details about that. Tonight, Jeff will be giving us some of his poems. Jeff, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chris. All right, so I think I'll start this up with wall dogs. Got kind of two shorter ones and one that's a little bit longer. This is one of the shorter ones. When you say build a wall, do you mean bring the war here? Are those manufacturing jobs? When you say build a wall, do you mean like a quarantine? Will they infect us or will we infect them? Will there be a festival, a farmer's market? Will people walk their dog down by the wall to take a dump? Will there be a wall roller coaster, a zip line? Is that Freedom Rock? When you say build a wall, do you mean like commission a mural? Will it be the same on both sides? If you say you mean like a scoreboard, I believe you. That's that one. Thanks. This one's a little bit more like fiction, but I don't know, maybe it's a poem too. It's called Wakey Wakey. The radio plays Strawberry Fields into Fred's passed out second floor apartment. Living is easy with eyes closed, misunderstanding all you see. I helped Fred move into his place in Arlington after we got kicked out of the apartment we rented in Oak Grove. He took the opportunity to make it on his own, while I burrowed into the basement of my father's apartment in Watertown. Fred never let me retreat too far into myself. He always needed my help with something neither of us knew how to do, except he did always know how to do the thing. The way he tells it, that morning, as his eyes focused on the wreckage around him, the whole place was colored with that rust feeling you got the first time you skipped school. When the office called and you zoned out into the sound of the ringing, you realized how you reacted then will echo into the rest of your life. He heard sounds just beyond the door, while the Beatles dutifully repeated themselves from under a stack of his clothes. The windows, mostly covered with pale blue sheets, hung a watchful eye like they knew what happened yesterday, like they knew what was making the sounds coming from outside. I first saw those sheets when we were packing to move out of Lyle Street. Fred was raised by his grandparents. All he ever said about his childhood was that his grandmother would take any opportunity to shit on him, or anything else for that matter. There wasn't one thing she didn't have a crappy opinion of. As he wrapped the sheet with a special plastic covering, he said, "This sheet covered my grandmother's deathbed, which makes it the last thing she ever got a chance to shit on. So I'm gonna take care of it the way I wish she had with me, just so she doesn't get to say what I am." As the sun's judgmental light pushed its orange into the room, past the poorly draped flannel shadows covered Fred's face, in much the same pattern as the meth pushing its poison through his pores. Fred knew to expect the paranoia. He saw it sweep through the after parties like a cop's best friend. He felt its tickle at the back of his throat buying cortisone cream at Osco last Friday. But when the cough came up blood yesterday, as he came down the elevator on the way out of his copy job in the all-glass building downtown, a single Nirvana lyric kept rolling through his head. Just because you're paranoid, don't mean they're not after you. They all knew. The people on the elevator with him, the people in his office staring at him from behind their machines. They knew why he missed work yesterday, why he was leaving just before lunch today. Everyone felt the old salty film living in Fred's collar. But what happened in the moments after the lightning crashed without thunder, just the sky shocking gray, was different than anyone thought possible. Fred will tell you he doesn't remember quieting his windows with his grandmother's sheets. Fred wants you to believe he doesn't remember the act of getting home yesterday at all, not because he refuses to suffer the truth. Fred won't tell you for the same reason his grandmother didn't tell him what happened to his parents. The difference between what was real and what was a drug-fueled hallucination was too blurred for his awkward mouth to work through. Fred hesitantly climbed from behind his bed, his Hawaiian shirt still stained with someone else's blood, Mike's stand trembling in his hands, a cigarette long spent of ash hanging from his lip. He needed coffee and for the sun to wake his sobering vision. Fred knew to expect the paranoia, but he didn't expect to see his Lyft driver's face half eaten by a crossing guard. Fred didn't expect to need to use his driver's body to shield himself as he sped away from a herd of parochial school students. He 100% did not expect to be forced to dump his rideshare driver's reanimated body out onto the road to stop him from chomping down on his arm. Only the harsh, bright words of the sun can tell Fred the truth about yesterday's violence. Taking a swig of once iced black coffee from the cup on his desk, Fred routed around in his pocket for a cigarette, except he pulled out the joint I gave him a few nights ago. He thought to himself, I'm going to want this after I look out that window. It's an echo from last night. Now I'll need to honor it, whether I'm headed to jail or hallucinating. That brings us to my present situation. Me slamming on Fred's front door with his zombified neighbor getting a whiff of my delicious weed-glazed brain. My life depended on a paranoid meth head realizing before real coffee that there is a real-life motherfucking zombie apocalypse happening out here. And if he doesn't open his door really soon, his neighbor is going to make a meal out of my brain. Fred! Fred! That's that one. Thanks. I just have one short one here left. I hope I haven't taken too much time.
Go for it.
Thanks. This one's called Catfish. I think it's funny. I'll end my set on humor here. My cat thinks voting is a sucker's game. I bought a cat collar on Etsy that says, "Go vote, Karen," but I've never put it on her. I showed it to her, pressed it right up to her eye and said, "This could all be yours if you just believe deeply enough." She looked at me like I'd wasted my breath. She hasn't believed in anything since being catfished by Taylor Swift. Every night for nearly a year, T. Swift scratched and purred from behind a bush under my window, mimicking our neighbor's cat's ritual, till she revealed her nefarious ruse to be an elaborate scheme, all to win a bet she made with Ariana Grande. It's been zero fucks in Bikini Kill ever since, coming face to face with the fact that rich people have screwed up pastimes and do not give a shit about any cat's feelings. She used to vote with her heart. Now she has none. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Really enjoyed that. It's a good segue for me too. We're talking about rich people and their behavior. The piece that I'm about to read is called Fall Guys. It's about corporate malfeasance. I wrote it when my son, who was newly born in February this year, Joaquin, he was born on leap year day or leap day. He's leap day baby. We named him Joaquin. If there was ever a year to name someone Joaquin, this was the year, right? So we took him for a quick checkup. We're sitting in the room. The woman comes out in a Medford accent, says, Joaquin, is Joaquin here? Joaquin Hickey. My wife and I look at each other. We just shake our heads. So this story was written for Joaquin Hickey. Fall Guys. Barry Sucker drummed his fingers nervously on the underside of the enormous conference table. He hadn't had a smoke in 2 hours. He willed himself to stop once he realized the others in the room heard the tapping. Barry didn't like fidgeting because it was his tell, a tell that allowed people to guess that immense storms churned within him. The table made him feel small. He couldn't prove it, but it seemed that the other tenants of the room were all sitting a bit higher than he was. Barry hated conference rooms, and especially those that were located in the mellow amber lit glow of consistently litigious law offices. Clandestine conference rooms hidden past banks of staff assistants and paralegals, where no one could hear cries for help, covered up by a labyrinth of office services churning out copies and printouts of pressing faxes, and the smug murmur of file cabinets that contained the grossly inflated receipts of billable lunches where clients may or may not have been discussed. He took a moment to think about all those legal documents assembled there, maybe dozens of high-profile cases, and the documentation just thrown together as a show of something substantial in order to unnerve the defendants of a civil class action lawsuit. He thought about how often things weren't what they appeared to be, and that the people in charge often had ways of holding on to the power they exerted over others. He bit his tongue, and he felt his ass pucker a bit. He almost came up out of the chair. It was go time. He needed to do the thing he was here to do. He licked his lips and flicked his teeth with his tongue, searching for the phantom cigarette not there. The gravity of his decision started to chip away at his resolve. His stomach fell as the room seemed to sway about him. He looked down at the contract before him and brought his still hands together, feeling the moisture seep into all the nooks and crannies of his palms. The fortune lines of his palms were inundated by sweat and were all but unreadable to even the best strip mall gypsy. Fortune had nowhere to travel for ill or for good. The will needed to control his motor functions was enormous. He wiped his palms on his jeans. He brought them from under the table as steadily as he could. He grabbed the ballpoint pen, and he felt the weight of it as he gently held it. It felt good to hold a decent pen. He marveled at how easily his mind jumped from his struggles to the superficiality of pen perks. He was an expert pen thief. He wondered if they would notice such a nice pen missing. He could go for it and always apologize for it if they caught him. The good feeling didn't last long, and the pen grew heavier, and he grew more anxious. Barry pulled it apart, and then he clicked it. A sound equally satisfying and ominous. Each action brought him closer to his newly resigned fate. He had one last bet to make, hoping it would all pay off. His wife often chided him for his prideful and disillusioned belief that he was a scratch poker player. Barry was not a scratch poker player or a scratch anything. In fact, many of the bets Barry had made turned out to be losers. The only talent he truly possessed was a preternatural gift for making poor choices, complemented only by a deeper ability to make even poorer choices in defense of the initial choices. This generally ended in a wake of broken promises, hollow gestures, and self-pitying narratives in the ways of explanation. Although it wouldn't be an epitaph that he would choose for himself, those that knew Barry best would appreciate if his tombstone read, "I didn't mean for this to happen." In truth, he really didn't mean for a great many things to happen the way they did. He just had hoped that they would have happened the way he envisioned them to happen in his mind. He put the pen below the signature line and ran it back and forth without pressing down, as if he was measuring the space to see if his signature would fit. He felt more moisture in his armpits, and he shifted in discomfort. Barry couldn't remember if he put on deodorant before he left the house. The women guiding him through the process seemed nice enough, but something about them made Barry more uncomfortable. He could sense that they were eager for him to sign the paperwork. "Mr. Sucker, is something wrong?" said the woman to his right. Yvonne Creighton shifted in her chair and straightened out her jacket. She then placed her manicured hands on the table quite deliberately. She imagined being anywhere but here and had grown tiresome of closing these accounts. She pushed her hands through her blonde bob with impatience. Her group manager tied a possible promotion for her to this close and she wanted that promotion very badly. She had to put up with a lot of shit to get it. The only benefit she found in this whole thing was working with her colleague, Beverly. No, I just want to make sure I'm doing the right thing, said Barry. Perfectly understandable. Did you show these documents to your counsel? Said the woman to his left. Beverly slurped her oversized mug, and Barry caught hints of coffee and Ticonderoga pencils on her breath, which he seemed to marvel at considering that he smoked so much. Couldn't stop fixating on her lips as she spoke. In truth, Yvonne couldn't either. He didn't know if he wanted to kiss her or if the movement of her lips pushed him toward a smoking association. Yeah, it's all taken care of, he said. The woman sitting next to Mr. Sucker in the tailored pantsuit exchanged knowing looks that said, clearly, he hasn't shown the paperwork to anyone. Yvonne and Beverly, for all intents and purposes, shared a mind and a singular purpose when it came to getting surrogates signed to contract. Perhaps that provided the best explanation as to why they worked so well together and had a flawless placement rate for their clients. Their look suggested that they were in possession of a shared understanding that their newest surrogate's acquiescence needed a little more coaxing. They had him. They only needed to get the appropriate wet signatures before Barry Sucker could be processed and inserted into the program. The signing always seemed more dramatic to the surrogates. The two women sitting slick and corporate knew that Barry's cooperation was inevitable. Otherwise, they would never have selected him as a candidate. They knew what surrogates would accept the terms of the new arrangement well in advance of the surrogates knowing that they would accept the terms. The house always wins. So remind me again, how long am I serving as a fall guy, said Barry. Not fall guy, Mr. Sucker, surrogate. We use the term surrogate here on the inside. Our clients are spending a great deal of money in order to ensure that this is a discrete business transaction. In no way will you ever be allowed to publicly refer to yourself as anything other than the defendant. That is clear on the gag order on page 75. Clearly, the terms of your service are indicated on pages 5, 7, 34, 42, and 98 of the contract, Mr. Sucker, answered Beverly. Barry flipped through the contract, skimming and trying to recall the page numbers he just heard. After a moment of concern, he gave up and looked back at the women beside him, still distracted by Beverly's lips. Yes, Mr. Sucker, 35 years with a chance of parole for good behavior at set intervals, kicking in at years 20, 25, 30, said Yvonne as she rubbed her temples with pink fingertips. Barry nodded in agreement. The women believed that it likely that he didn't read through the entire contract. In fact, they counted on that very fact. Without his own counsel there, they were under no obligation to explain to him that he would ultimately waive his agreed-upon service term if the defendant he was acting as a surrogate for was involved in future crimes not yet committed, and he would be forced to serve more time based on those crimes. This would be the price Barry paid for waiving representation. He would go into this believing that he was serving time for the sentence suggested by the court. Little did he realize that while on the inside, he could be held liable for any other corporate crimes committed by a defendant. This was one of the more sinister and genius parts of the Fall Guy's promise. Not only will we keep you free from all past and current accountability, but we'll keep you free from all future accountability as well. Barry put the cap back on his pen. He did this over and over while the conversation played out among the three of them. A fourth person came into the room. It was a paralegal, and he was brought in for observation so he could learn the finer points of tagging a surrogate. Really just window dressing. He was easy on the eyes, and Beverly liked having him around. He was too young to realize that she was harassing him at every turn, or maybe he didn't care. She hadn't slept with him yet, but he was in the queue. She thought it would be a nice reward for getting this contract signed. Yvonne seemed to be put off when Beverly talked about her conquests, but listened in hopes of any signs of a chance that she might be into women. Although Yvonne had been in a 6-year relationship with her boyfriend, it had run its course and fizzled out. Now all Yvonne could do was obsess over her fascination with her team partner at work and internet porn. She would often take her iPad into her evening baths. She didn't even bother clearing the browser history, hoping that perhaps its discovery might be a catalyst to an impending breakup. Her boyfriend had no clue that while she was thrusting away, all Yvonne was thinking about was behind her closed eyes was Beverly. The only other person in the room was that paralegal. So Barry kept bringing the pen to the signature line and then would take it away. His reticence was becoming palatable. Women didn't panic, but started to feel as though it could take longer than they anticipated. It was not a matter of time or if, but when. They wanted to wrap it up before lunch so they could go get some food at the restaurant around the corner. After all, it was 2 for 1 day. Despite the slick image that they promoted, they loved getting their manicured hands on greasy street tacos and burritos. They ate their food as greedily as their client dreams of liberty. All the current quarter's clients had surrogates, and this last surrogate needed to sign so that they would be ready to be processed and sentenced in the next session docket. Barry tried to remember how he got wrapped up in this situation. Wasn't he referred to this service by a friend of a friend who had been through the program and lived to tell about it? The friend of a friend had all of his debt expunged and had a 30-year note on his house paid off. It seemed like a slam dunk. If he could get out there early for good behavior, in 20 years, he could walk away with all of his student debt, credit card debt, and gambling debt paid off. Wouldn't it be worth the risk? Camilla, Barry's wife, took a lot of convincing. Despite her initial support, she ultimately gave him an opportunity to practice signing. When the constable served him with divorce papers, Barry was surprised, but not surprised. He reasoned out that it would be easier this way. He would miss the kids, though. He believed that she would one day understand what he had sacrificed so that the family could succeed. Mr. Sucker, is there a problem? Came the question. I just don't know. I think I need more time with this, he said sheepishly. Is there something you need clarification on, said Yvonne. I don't know. Maybe if you could walk me through it one more time, said Barry. Both women stood bolt upright and removed their jackets and rolled up their sleeves. Attempting to hide all exasperation from Barry, they took a firm approach and tried to make it seem as if they were all in it together. Okay, we'll go through it one more time, Mr. Sucker, but after we're finished, we're going to need you to sign that contract. We have an important meeting at 1 o'clock that can't be missed. Yeah, just one more time. I'll sign it after I hear it one more time. Hey, is there any way I can get a smoke? The women looked at each other. Yvonne started. Will it help you sign the contract? Beverly was shaking her head slowly at Yvonne. The amount of nonverbal communication between the two had ramped up to an all-time high while working on this surrogate. Yes, I'll be happy to sign after a smoke. One more time. Barry said through pursed lips, cradling a newly found moving cigarette. He brought the Zippo lighter up and he lit the head of the cigarette. Beverly motioned to the paralegal to close the door of the conference room. He acted without hesitation. The women started to roll off one line after another line of explanation, detailing every part of their roles, Barry's role, and how the Fall Guys were created to serve a very specific clientele. Between audible tuts and several passes of hands through the air, it was evident that they were losing their patience with Barry. As part of this law firm, we represent a company that was created to help people that have made bad decisions, but don't necessarily want to deal with the consequences of those decisions. We're here to serve our clients and at the same time help people like you solve your problems. We try to make it a win-win, a true quid pro quo. At the macro level, we support thousands of corporate types. For whatever reason, we're foolish enough to be caught committing white-collar crime. Well, we provide them an opportunity to escape the legal fates related to those choices, said Beverly. Right, we allow them the opportunity to cultivate a career narrative that is free of such missteps and allows them to pursue their careers unhindered by such inconveniences, said Yvonne. That's where you come in. You absorb the accountability for the choices made by our clients. All within the letter of the law and upon your agreement, of course, we build you a career narrative that aligns with our clients and we insert you into their corporate structure. We create your work history, pay stubs, thousands and thousands of files, presentations in physical office, on and on and on. We do this as if you had been working for the client's company all along. We create social media accounts. We plant temps that have tawdry stories of your holiday party excesses and working knowledge of the company's culture. We build a network of people that supports the existence of your career within the framework of that client's company, even though you were never there, said Beverly. To an outside observer, it's seamless. And to investigators, if they ever bothered to truly take a look, it would all appear on the up and up, said Yvonne. It's virtually foolproof, said Beverly. We hold all the cards, said Yvonne. We know all the judges, the attorneys, the human resources people. We leave no stone unturned. It's as if you're always part of whatever company we place you in, said Yvonne. Barry kept smirking and shaking his head. He enjoyed the idea of being part of a company. Can I have a corner office, he said, through a plume of expelled smoke. The two women looked at each other, barely able to contain their disdain for him. Beverly wanted to slap the cigarette out of his mouth. She always felt compelled to slap cigarettes out of people's mouths whenever she saw them smoking. She wondered if there was a word for that feeling. Yes, of course. We can get you a corner office, said Beverly through clenched jaw. What matters most is that the company picks up all of your debt and pays it off, said Yvonne. Barry started to become more animated in his chair and displayed less anxiety. He rolled the pen over his knuckles, tapped it on the table while puffing away on his butt. Once you sign the contract, we can begin. We already have the pre-work done, and they have built your career narrative, said Beverly. Can I see it, said Barry. If you want, we can bring it up on the display. Beverly got the paralegal's attention and gestured him towards the display. He fiddled with the remote, plugged in the jump drive into the port in the nearby desktop used for presentations. It took a minute to boot up. They hadn't expected to go to the pre-work presentation. They believed that Sucker would sign as soon as he hit the conference room. Sometimes it took a little finesse at the end, as surrogates sometimes get cold feet at the signing. The paralegal then jumped over to the ceiling floor blinds and began to pull the string to swivel the blinds. What about the guy I'm replacing, said Barry. Well, technically, after we're through, you won't be replacing him, but rather accepting the consequences of his actions, said Yvonne. You mean I get the blame for what he did, said Barry. Yes, that's the whole point. You serve the sentence for the crimes he committed. That way he is happy. You get your debt paid, and the prosecuting attorney gets their sacrificial lamb, said Beverly. Everyone ends up a winner, said Yvonne. The paralegal smiled so widely he nearly split his face in two. He brought up the presentation and began the slideshow. Barry watched as picture after picture of him at corporate events, company picnics, company retreats, and shareholders meetings danced across the display. It was the most surreal version of This Is Your Life that he could imagine. His eyes began to water, and he didn't know if he was sad because he would go to prison for a lie or if he would go to prison for a truth, which he wished was real. He couldn't believe how the alternate life flashing before his eyes made him feel. There was record of him being successful, and he had never been successful. Tears spilled from his eyes, and he wiped them away with the back of his forearm. Yvonne and Beverly walked over to the sideboard table, poured out glasses of water for themselves. Barry remained transfixed on the presentation. Yvonne reached up and grabbed an eyelash off Beverly's cheek. Beverly awkward moved back because of the invasion of space. It's just an eyelash, see, said Yvonne, as she carefully lifted it between her thumb and forefinger. Make a wish and blow, said Yvonne. Beverly played along, blew on Yvonne's fingers. The lash disappeared. Yvonne held her breath for a moment, considered her own wishes. She couldn't wait to get out of the conference room. She was hungry and wanted to spend some time alone with her compulsions. The courtesy phone in the conference room squealed. The paralegal answered. He seemed to nod in the affirmative. He placed his hand over the receiver of the phone and said, Bev, it's for you. Beverly moved over to where the phone was located and accepted the receiver from the paralegal. She placed it in her ear and covered the other ear to block out the noise of the presentation. She listened, then answered, No, he hasn't signed the contract yet. We're almost there. Yes, please tell the client it's almost done. We will contact him as soon as it's finalized. No, sir. Yes, thank you, sir. Yes, absolutely. Goodbye. She placed the receiver on the hook. She shot a quick glance at Yvonne, and Yvonne acknowledged. They were in sync. They moved in for the final push. They got on each on the other side of Barry, and Yvonne pulled another cigarette from the pack Barry had left on the table and offered it to him. Beverly grabbed the zipper lighter and opened it, inviting Barry to light the cigarette. He willingly complied and popped the cigarette into his mouth. Okay, I'm ready, Barry said. He took a deep breath. He picked up the pen and motioned to Beverly to show him where to sign. Beverly said, Hold on a minute, please. She motioned to the paralegal to come over and witness the signing. The paralegal moved into position. Okay, so here, you need to initial here and sign again, Beverly said. The whole signing process took a matter of 15 minutes to get through. What Barry hadn't noticed during the signing was that the paralegal had gone to the door to allow a contingency of uniformed police officers into the room. They were now standing behind him as he was almost at the completion of signing his life away. Barry also didn't hear the rising conversation that was coming from the outside conference room. Will you take me to my office so I can see it? Barry asked Beverly. We'll see about that. Let's finish signing the contract first, Yvonne answered. Okay, last one, right here, Beverly pointed. Barry signed it with a bit of a flourish while simultaneously taking the last haul of the smoke. That does that, he said. Yvonne gathered up the paperwork and brought it over to the paralegal for notarization. This took about 3 minutes. Can you play the presentation again? Asked Barry. We're sorry, Mr. Sucker. We have to postpone that. We have a gentleman here that would like to have a word with you. Who? Asked Barry. Just then, the uniform officers moved forward toward Barry and placed their hands on his shoulders. Barry Sucker, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you can't say will be used against you in the court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, one will be provided for you. Wait, what's happening? Said Barry. Come with us, Mr. Sucker. Wait, Beverly, Yvonne, what about my office? When are you going to show me the office? Mr. Sucker, as an agent of the firm representing Willard and Sons, I'm notifying you of your immediate termination from Willard and Sons, and it is my duty to inform you that you lose all rights, privileges associated with the position that you are being terminated from due to your involvement in a series of violations that have occurred over a period of 20 years, said Beverly. Wait, there was no mention of being arrested today, Barry said. Barry started to gain purchase on the anger that was boiling underneath the surface. He gesticulated wildly and moved threateningly toward Beverly. Yvonne placed herself between them, but it didn't matter much as the uniformed officers already had a hold of him. They moved him over to the conference table and down to engage the hand restraints. Do not resist the dark with Harry as they escorted him over the throat. All sorts of local media types and somehow tipped off the recipe. Are you okay? Yvonne said. Yes, you. I can't believe we did it. We reached our quota. We kicked ass. Beverly smiled and accepted the flute of champagne from the paralegal. She gave him a wry smile and suggestively caressed his hand as he pulled it away. Yes, we did, she said. I really thought he was going to bail on us, said Yvonne. No, we had him. He just needed the presentation and the promise of the office. That sealed it. We make a great team, Bev. That we do. Now all we have to do is the press conference and announce the arrest and interim changes. Do you think the client will be pleased, said Yvonne? Yes, this one will go a long way in setting things up. I think we'll both get promotions they've been dangling in front of us. I just hope that they don't break up our team. Do you think they'll split us up? I hope not. We work well together. If they have to rename the company Fall Girls instead of Fall Guys, would you hand me my jacket? Yvonne grabbed Beverly's jacket and brought it up to her nose. She then took a drink of the flute of champagne. Are you ready for the press conference? She said. Yes, I'm all set. I just need to file this contract with the registry. His processing won't take too long. The contract ink will have fully dried by the time he gets to the court. I don't know why these guys think they can ever outsmart the system. I wanted to smack those cigarettes out of his mouth. They don't even realize what they're trading off on when they agree to sign. They don't even care to. They're so desperate to get out from under their debt and sins. They don't even realize how short their debt is to the company with pockets as large as Willard and Sons. No, they don't. And if they knew it was used as a tax write-off, tell me about it. Lunch? Yes, I'm starving. Well, let's get it after the press conference. Okay, sounds good. Yvonne put on her jacket, and the women moved down the hall to the adjoining conference room to make announcements to the media about the arrest of Mr. Barry Sucker and the alleged accusations of his misdeeds over the course of the last 20 years at Willard and Sons. They talked about the arrest, the court date, and the interim changes. Although the arrest had just occurred, all was set in motion the day Barry Sucker found the Fall Guys flyer and came in for an assessment seminar. Barry would serve time for an unknown client, so that client wouldn't have to do so. He would likely spend an inordinate amount of time trying to figure out how people in power held on to that power and why all too often things weren't what they appeared to be. Was this another one of those bad decisions or his ticket out? That would remain to be seen. But one thing seems certain, the house always wins. That's it. All right, that was quite a mouthful. Just give me a moment here. That concludes the reading for tonight. I was the last in line. I want to thank everybody that came out tonight and participated. Jason M. Rubin, Felicia Ryan, Rebecca Brooks, Heather Angel, Jeff Taylor, and Jason Kenny. So sorry, having two Jasons is a bit much for my old mind. I can't always remember everybody's last name. I apologize for that. Thank you, everybody. I'm so enthusiastic about your contributions to this year. All the pieces that you brought to workshop were magnificent. They've impacted me in many, many ways, as well as the other participants of the workshop. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank several people that aren't here tonight. Julie Kelleher and Michelle Aroha, basically in times in which I needed help doing workshops or in times I wasn't present, they jumped in and they filled the gaps. people present on this call as well, Jason, Heather, Felicia, everybody here tonight, Rebecca, was helpful in taking your that was a bit odd and making it better. As I said, we meet twice a month in person. We spend a lot of our time doing our creative thing alone. So when we get together with other writers, it's a great thing. We had to shift that format online. So it was a bit of a change for us, but it couldn't be done without the support of all these great people. I also have to thank Evangeline Vickery as well as Andrew Wiedenhofer. Evangeline Vickery is the founder of the Malden Writers Collaborative. She was the moderator for 8 years. She and Andrew relocated, and it was a privilege for me to take over as moderator of the group. So I've been doing it for the last 2 years. And we wouldn't be as successful as we are without the home that's provided by the Malden Public Library. And our liaison, Jean Slavkowski, she puts this all together tonight. She's responsible for making this a wonderful event. This is the first time we've done it live on a remote adventure. So we'll see. We'll collect our thoughts after this and see where we go next year and what happens. I'll wrap it up. I'll say thank you again for attending. Thank all the readers tonight, and thank you all for the support of viewing. If anybody is interested in joining the group or finding out more information about the group, you can send an email to maldenwriters@gmail.com. Would be happy to hear from you and any thoughts that you have about tonight's reading. Thank you so much for the support. Thank you, Jean.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Guys.
Good
Good
time.
night.
Thank you, everyone. Thank
Thanks,
you,
everyone.
writers. And if you want to see more content, we keep posting our videos to YouTube. So take a look. I've been uploading a lot of fairy tales and folk tales, and there's stuff for everyone. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. Have a good night.